Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, or Ratchet & Clank 2 as it's referred to in the other regions besides the US, and what I'll be calling it for the rest of this video, is one of my favorite games ever. It was my first PS2 game, and I knew Game Plus through it at least 20 times as a kid. I had so many bolts and went outside the HUD box for it. Back in the day, I could probably speedrun that game in an hour or two. You know, with the help of the Rhino, of course. This game took everything that was great from the first game and built upon it, and in my opinion, is an example of a perfect sequel and a near perfect game. Full warning that this video is going to be massively nostalgia biased. My nostalgia goggles are on my head so hard for this game that they're in danger of melding to my skull. So I hope you excuse the somewhat clickbaity title because this is something I wholeheartedly believe. Now this is my first attempt at a video like this, so this is probably going to be extremely rough. So sorry ahead if you're expecting somebody like Super Bunny Hop or Joseph Anderson level quality. Ratchet & Clank is a series that is targeted for kids, but respects your intelligence as a player, and doesn't hardcore hold your hand, and treat you like you're a drooling moron like most of its contemporaries do now.
We're 20 fucking hours in! I know how to catch a Pokemon! Stop with the tutorials!
While it does have tutorial messages which you could easily turn off or skip by pushing triangle, without them the game on its own does an excellent job at teaching you its mechanics, and then later tests what you've learned by building upon them, along with adding other elements and mechanics to it. Now the last time I played this game before buying it again last week and deciding I wanted to do a video on it after I was halfway done with it, was roughly 2009 before I traded in my PS2 and my collection of games for Left 4 Dead 2, Halo Wars, and some other random game I can't even remember. That was a decision I would regret later in my life, so playing it now is really interesting going back through the areas I struggled with as a kid. A lot of the times I wondered how much of a stupid child I had to have been to have struggled in some of these areas that I can now easily beat on my first try. Most of these areas were the flight sections, so I guess younger me couldn't wrap his head around inverted controls and flying in a 3D space. Again, like I stated a few minutes earlier, this is going to be a lot of gushing about little things and praising this game probably more than it deserves. I'm playing the PS3 HD collection version of this game, which is overall a pretty good port. There's some weird issues with character models clipping into each other in the in-game cutscenes, which I assume was from upscaling the game from 4:3 to 16:9, along with things being viewable in the frame now that wouldn't have been in the past. Characters that would have not been in the screen when in 4:3 slide across with no animations or just stand there aimlessly until they would have been in the frame in the 4:3 aspect ratio. I just find this hilarious more than an issue. The only thing that's pretty bad is the slowdown sometimes in using the mini nuke in a large group of enemies that are also shooting projectiles, like when you're fighting the Megacorp troopers. Now this could have been in the original title and my tiny mind had no concept of lag, so I didn't remember it, but it's pretty apparent now.
Welcome back to Behind the Hero.
The game opens up to an interview with the duo talking about what they're doing now after defeating Drek in the previous title. They've grown bored with the peace and the mundaneness of their lives. Ratchet seems almost depressed, going, I guess no one needs a hero anymore. Meanwhile, in the Bogon galaxy, Mr. Fizzwidget sees this broadcasting and teleports them to his galaxy to hire them to save his recently stolen experiment. Ratchet of course agrees with immense excitement to actually be needed again and craving the action, which is really cool to see how much he's grown as a character from the last game where he was pretty much reluctant to save the day and actively didn't want to take part in any of it for most of the game.
This is not about Captain Quark anymore. There are innocent lives being lost.
Yeah? Well, I'm done with this stupid hero stuff. I got my own agenda now.
They may know where he is.
Is that all you can think about? Drek this and Drek that? I got my own problems.
After 2 weeks of training, Ratchet infiltrates the flying labs alone, equipped with the Lancer and the gravity bomb. Clank is not with you in these missions, just like at the beginning of the first game. It teaches you the basics first and lets you get used to how the game feels before it adds any more depth into platforming with Clank. I really like how hitting the MSR near the windows and platforms will send them flying. It's a small thing, but it's nice to see little attention to details like that, and the little details are what this game excels at. I really like how it takes into account that they're a giant ship flying in the middle of a clouded city. Other games would just had the windows be non-breakable. After making your way through the ship, you reach the experiment, and you are ambushed by the masked assailant who recently stole it. After escaping by the skin of your teeth, Mr. Fizzwidget shows you a clip of a store where the masked assailant stole star maps to, which leads you to planet Uzla. Arriving at the Megacorp outlets, you are now able to purchase the chopper and the blitz gun. Like most of the planets that will follow, you have 2 separate paths you can take, each with a different objective at the end. If you really wanted to boil it down to the basics, it's 2 obstacle courses, with something at the end that either pushes the plot forward or gives you a new gadget. Going left, you will run into the mutant muck dwellers and the swamp beasts. This is where the game's enemy setup starts introducing itself. A lot of the worlds from now on will follow this formula. A smaller enemy, which I will refer to as the pet enemy, in this case it's the muck dweller, and then the mid-sized enemy, that I will now refer to as the soldier enemy, and in this case it's the swamp beasts. Usually for the most part, the soldier type enemies will have projectile-based weapons, but there's always the exceptions like the MSR and the swamp beasts, among others that will come into play later. Now I could be reading too much into this, but a lot of the worlds follow this formula, so I feel like I am justified in making this assumption. Mactar Nebula has the Megacorp chicken bots and the Thugs for Less brutes. Planet Barlow has the Gadgetron hounds of cuddly death and the Vakovar tribesmen. Planet Inako has the Megacorp sweeper bots and the Megacorp laser bots. This isn't even mentioning the larger enemies, which I don't have a clever title for, like the Megacorp rivet bot and the Varlowayan Czar beast, or even the smaller enemies that fly around like the Blade Ball or the mutant fireflies. Anyway, continuing left, you'll run into the game's first boss, the Swamp Monster. It's a relatively easy boss, which is fine since it's the first one of the game, and it's here to teach you about strafing. One of the biggest changes that is apparent almost right away is how the gunplay is compared to the first game. In Ratchet & Clank 1, there wasn't really any hard lock-on. Bullets traveled in a way where it feels reminiscent of Halo's bullet magnetism system. Like for example, the blaster's pellets would start curving towards enemies. I guess looking back, it makes more sense that a lot of the weapons of Ratchet & Clank 1 are AoE based when they have an aiming system like this. This was fine for the most part, but at times where you're fighting a lot of projectile based enemies like a group of the Blarg, it got really hectic and you took a lot of unnecessary damage because you couldn't hit the enemies properly. Other times you'd have to try to attack them from afar using the first person mode, which felt like it was breaking the flow of gameplay. Maybe this seems like a bigger problem to me because I started with Ratchet & Clank 2 and then went back to 1, so I'm interested to hear what other people think who started with 1 and then went to 2, because with the strafing system it allows you to move horizontally from enemies, making it easier to dodge enemy fire while applying your own damage to them. This system would later be perfected in the next game, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal or Ratchet & Clank 3. After defeating the Swamp Monster, you will come up to the first gadget of the game, the Dynamo, which creates holographic platforms which you can use to climb and traverse on. It starts off simple with just raising platforms that you must get on top of, but as the game progresses they get more and more challenging. Now you have to go through a hallway with crates coming at you that you need to dodge. While yes, it is simple and the crates are moving very slowly, it does something that I really adore, which I feel like is somewhat lacking now. Egoraptor talked about this in his sequelitis on Mega Man, and how the platforming gives you ample time to see what you need to do, and if you fuck up, it's your fault. At the end of the hallway you get a cutscene from Fizzwidget, giving you info on where to go next. This is the first of the satire commercials and cutscenes that these games are known for. I get a really strong Paul Verhoeven vibe to them, very RoboCop and Starship Trooper-like.
Are you man enough, hero enough, insane enough to step into the ring with 2 of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy? If you answered yes, you're a big, fat liar. But that's okay, because Megacorp is bringing galactic gladiators into your home for a special Mega View event.
People from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
Now we could leave and go to the Mactar Nebula, but instead we want to go back to the start and go right this time. Now you'll ride on the Ratchet & Clank universe's interpretation of Lapras, again starting off basic, teaching the player the mechanics, then slowly making them more complex. At the end you'll run into a Megacorp employee who is demonstrating the tractor beam. You can buy this off him for 1,000 bolts. I love how the camera moves in these cutscenes throughout the game, showing you what you're going to have to do. Again, it's a small thing that probably shouldn't be praised, but fuck it, I'm gonna gush about it anyway. If you're an observant player and didn't just rush back to your ship to go to the next planet, you can see on the other side of the room that you could arrange the pillars to get to a platinum bolt. These bolts are hidden throughout every level in the game. As of right now, they have no use for you other than being a collectible, so just keep that in mind for later. We have completed everything we possibly can on planet Uzla currently, so now we can head over to the Mactar Nebula. I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect game, unless you're Kirby Superstar Ultra. Usually there's 1 or 2 things that will bring the game's overall experience down, and for this game, it's the space combat. I really hate these sections. I find them incredibly boring and repetitive. I wish I could remove them from the game. I definitely hate them more now as an adult than I did as a kid, but I guess that was because I didn't know any better then. I used to think movie tie-in games like Chicken Little and The Incredibles were good. These areas take way too long and they're extremely tedious. You can shoot the rocks that are floating adrift in space to get raritanium, which you'll use to upgrade your ship later. You must defeat 2 waves of enemies before you can proceed to your destination. Arriving at the Maktar Resort, you are greeted by the Thugs for Less brutes and the Megacorp chicken bots. We're gonna go right this time and need to use the tractor beam again. If we let Uzla as soon as we got the coordinates to Maktar, we would have had to end up coming back to get the tractor beam. So you always want to try to get as much done on planets before you leave them. You need to get to the inspector bot onto the ID platforms in order to open these doors. And I know this is going to get old extremely fast and it's probably already feeling repetitive to some viewers. But again, starting simple, you just have to drag him to the platform. But then they introduce that you have to slingshot him so he lands perfectly on it, or else he's just going to walk away off and back onto the ground. Once you take down all 4 of the shield generators with a tractor beam, you can then get into a limo spaceship will then take you to the Thugs for Less jamming array, where you need to take out 6 of their towers. I love how the map works on these moons, being able to view the whole planet's model and look around it, along with how the camera zooms back in when going back to the player character. At this point, if you're using nothing but the Lancer and sparingly use the gravity bomb, you'll have gained enough experience so you'll upgrade into the Heavy Lancer. The more you kill enemies with weapons, the more proficiency and experience you get with them, until they upgrade into their new forms. For the Heavy Lancer, its ammo's been now increased to 300, along with its damage increase and including its rate of fire. After destroying all 6 towers, you're able to get back into contact with Mr. Fizzwidget, who tells you to head to planet Barlow, which we don't want to go to just yet, because we need some things from this planet and another planet later, where we could actually explore Barlow entirely. So now we're going to return to our ship and go left this time, where we are reintroduced to ledge platforming from the previous title, along with wall hopping. At the end, you'll reach the entrance to the Megacorp Arena. Now this just could be my brain filling in the gaps of information, but the crowd cheering really sounds like a distorted shout of people saying Ratchet and Clank. You're the first person to ever win the Gladiator Games, and you are awarded with the Electrolyzer. The arena is a great place to farm bolts if you need to buy anything, along with getting any weapon proficiencies you'll need to upgrade your weapons. You can now choose to either leave the arena because you have the Electrolyzer, or you can continue to play more games, fighting against the bosses like Chainblade and the B2 Brawler. Let's just stay for now and fight Chainblade. This boss shouldn't be too difficult since you've already learned strafing from fighting the swamp monster back in the previous planet. The next boss, the B2 Brawler, which can be a little bit tougher for newer players compared to Chainblade, because you have to keep in mind all of his spinning legs while trying not to get knocked off to the platforms where the electricity is, taking even more damage. At leaving the arena, you use the Electrolyzer for the first time in order to get back to your ship. You need to flip the connectors so the little beams of light can go through them. If any of the beams of light happen to hit a connector that isn't flipped the right way, you'll end up losing and have to restart from the beginning. Ratchet decides to stop at a photo booth to get a souvenir picture for Clank, but then gets a message from the masked assailant saying he has captured Clank, so now you need to go rescue him on planet Indako. Once you arrive, you get a beautiful shot of the busy city with all the bustling ships flying around. You can really see how much effect Megacorp has and how everything is a Megacorp brand product. You got your Megacorp steel shutter doors, your Megacorp sweeper bots, your Megacorp trash cans, your Megacorp surveillance cameras.
Because we are always watching you, because we own you.
Once arriving here, you can now purchase the pulse rifle and the mini turret gun from the vendor. I personally never really used the pulse rifle until I absolutely need to later on at a planet near the end of the game. We're going to start off by going left on this planet, doing more electrolyzer puzzles. Now you can operate the crane, which I have to say is a lot more fun than I would expect using, like picking up the laser bots and using it around like a death laser to hit other enemies to make your path clear to go through by yourself. You see a door that you have to open with a tool, but it doesn't match the electrolyzer, so that means we'll just have to come back later again. At the end of the hallway, you reach Clank and are pushed down into the room by the masked assailant. Once you reactivate Clank, you guys wonder how you're going to get out of here. This is one of my only real complaints with the game. I know this is going to come off a little nitpicky, but you should have been able to wall jump out as Ratchet. It's not like the game hasn't shown you yet how to do it. It specifically shows you on the path that you have to take to get the coordinates to this planet. So it's not like you missed it if you say you left Maktar only going left instead of going right to the Space Jam Array, just so you could save Clank as soon as possible. But realistically, I guess they just did this so you could introduce the Clank levels, which have returned from the first game. I know some people don't really like these sections, but I think they're fine. I'll admit they are a little on the blander side of things, especially once you start new game plussing through the game repeatedly and try to speed run. Now with Clank on your back, you have the access to the helipack and the rocket thrusters, which will add an extra layer of depth with the platforming. Once Clank frees away for Ratchet to get out, you two now return to the start and can go right, requiring you to break the trash cans so the sweeper bots will come and try to apprehend you, taking down their force fields. After fighting through multiple areas of sweeper bots and trash cans, you are confronted by the leader of the Thugs for Less in a helicopter. I remember this boss being pretty challenging as a kid, having to dodge all the rockets while being on such a tiny platform. Once beating him, you could then teleport to Clank's apartment, where you get your old swing shot and grind boots, which were returning from the first game. You could also see a picture of Jack and Daxter on the TV, because Insomniac and Naughty Dog were really close during the development of their games. I love the swing shot so much. I could honestly play an entire Ratchet game which is just swing shot challenges. Funnily enough, Insomniac is working on the new Spider-Man game, so hopefully the mechanics will transfer over well into that. You can now go back to the halfway point of this side of the level and access the grind rail section. This will take you to Slim Cognito, which you can upgrade your weapons using platinum bolts you've been collecting. We now have everything we need on this planet and can now head to planet Barlow. The reason why I said we needed to go to Planet Endako first before coming to Planet Barlow, because if you ended up coming here first, you would have ended up having to leave due to not being able to perform the platforming areas with the swing shot going right, and if you went all the way through all of the tribesman camps going forward, at the very end you wouldn't have been able to reach to the hoverbike racers because you need Clank's helipack to make the jump, because the gap is just way too big. Arriving at Barlow, you see a wrecked sign of Gadgetron, the weapons dealer from the previous title, further solidifying how Megacorp has completely taken over the Bogon Galaxy. Going left, you'll run into the Gadgetron Hounds of Cuddly Death and the Vakovar tribesmen, some which are riding the Sar beasts. After fighting a few, you see how under-equipped they are compared to you with your advanced technology and weapons. This further plays into the theme that this planet has been completely abandoned by Gadgetron and Megacorp hasn't come in taking over with their corporate power. But the tribesmen lack in weapons, they make up for their numbers on this planet, fighting you in large groups along the way and ambushing you in certain areas. Once you make your way through the camps, you come up to a Gadgetron sales bot, and if you have a save file on your console from the first game, you'll get these weapons for free. This is because you have the employee discount for working at Gadgetron, but the CEO said it was going to take 2 years before it would kick in for you, which was how long between both the game's developments, which is a nice little nod for the in-game universe and real-life joke playing into this.
Do I get a discount on gadgets now?
You have to be with the company for 2 years before the employee discount kicks in.
You're also able to buy the Rhino 2 from this vendor, the hands down best weapon in this game, and once you have it, it becomes a utter cakewalk. It definitely lives up to its $1,000,000 price tag. Now that you have Clank, you can now make the jump to the hoverbike racers. Hoverbike racing is this game's version of the hoverboard racing from the first game. I can't really decide which one I like more. I think I'm more leaning to the hoverboard racing, because I think skateboarding is cooler than bikes and cars. You're also able to do like cool tricks like flips and shit, kind of like a skate game. But once you go into first place, you'll then be able to enter the bike gang, giving you an honorary helmet, and you'll then be able to get messages from the Thugs for Less leader about the company's new meeting in the Veldin system, which is now added to your map. Now heading back to the start, you'll be going right using the swing shot for platforming. This final part of the swing shot was an area that I really struggled with as a kid, trying to time it right with the moving platforms and landing there with a swing shot. So many times I failed and just fell right into nothing. Now that you've made it to the end, you see a person frozen in a block of ice. You can break them out by just hitting them with your wrench, and it turns out they're a Gadgetron employee that's been frozen for countless years when they were showing off their new invention, the Terminator, which allows you to freeze water or melt ice. You can purchase this item from him for 1,000 bolts. We've now collected everything we need from Barlow and can now head to the Veldin system to the Thugs rendezvous point. This is the second section of space combat in the game, and I don't really have anything more to add to this. It's still boring and not really that fun to me. It was cool though that you got to fly through the hangar and asteroids. That was fun, but again, it's the same thing of survive 2 waves of enemies while they're shooting at you, along with trying to collect as much raritanium as you can. Arriving at Canal City, you just missed the masked assailant, but the duo decides that they should look around for any further clues. You'll now be able to purchase the Synthnoid, which spawns 4 little bots that'll float above you that'll fight in combat with you when the enemies are within their range. This level is relatively short, so going left will make you go through a shopping district, which at the end you're rewarded with a nanotech boost. These are items hidden throughout the game that'll increase your health level by 1 pip, so keep your eyes peeled if you ever see them throughout this game. Now going back to the start, we'll be heading heading forward to progress the plot. I hope by now you have the gravity bomb upgraded into the mini nuke, because you're going to be having a little difficult time if you don't, having to fight all these thugs for less goons and their helicopters. At the halfway point on top of a building, you then see an ad for Slim Cognito's Ship Shack, which you can upgrade your ship using Raritanium. Unless you plan on maxing out your ship's upgrades, you really don't need to go here more than once or twice just to keep up with the game's scaling difficulty in the later spaceship levels. Jumping down, you'll now be able to enter the factory, which is filled with water-based puzzles using the Therminator. These are relatively simple except for the last one, where you have to time it just right where the water level is high enough so you could reach the ledges in the next room, but they're also low enough so you could walk through the pipe. At the end, you meet some sales bots that Clank has to talk to because Ratchet is unable to speak their language. He says they have a message from the masked assailant about an order from them, but in order to see, we have to pay them 6,000 bolts. The stingy fuckers. This order message from the masked assailant now gives you coordinates to where they're keeping the experiment. The frozen base is another short planet with only one objective. If you go behind the first shed in the game, you'll run into a Snow Dan, which is a reference to Insomniac employee Dan Johnson. He makes cameos in every Ratchet & Clank game, barring Ratchet & Clank Deadlock and Ratchet & Clank Going Mobile. I'll be mentioning these references as we come across them throughout the game. You'll be fighting the MRS Chainsaw Model version 2 and the MRS Flamethrower Model version 2. These are the upgraded versions of these enemies, which you can denote from their new color palette of green and orange along with their extra armor, so you can no longer kill them with a single strike downwards, like you've been doing up until now. These deal way more damage compared to the previous ones, now dealing 3 health instead of 1. As the trade-off for having a rather shorter level, you do have a really cool set piece. I know it's pretty lame by today's standards, but this shit was cool as fuck to me as a kid. Fighting robots while you're on a high-speed train of trucks through a canyon, while you have to slingshot and occasionally fight the mass assailant on the rooftops of these trucks, only for it to end with a car crash and you're now in a massive arena where you have to face off against the masked assailant and all of their robots and turrets. If you don't have the mini turret glove, then this fight is going to be pretty tough because the masked assailant spawns turrets at the brim of the arena. Defeating the masked assailant, you're now able to free the proto-pet from the rocket ship it was tied to. You now agree to meet Mr. Fizzwidget on a decommissioned mining planet that Megacorp owns. Fizzwidget further showing how much of a child he is by getting distracted and crashing on top of your ship, and then after giving you a ride, accidentally ejects you when trying to turn on the radio. This person runs a massive company that has complete galactic dominance? Guess the Alzheimer's are setting in. On another note, it's really cool to see how the duo reacts to these turn of events. Clank is actually the angry one in this situation, and Ratchet is the relaxed one. In the previous game, the roles would have absolutely been swapped.
Did that on purpose.
Nah, he's just easily distracted.
Yeah, well.
Come on, let's see if we can find a way out of here. Get off of me, you idiot!
I love it when a plan comes together.
What do you mean?
Now you can purchase the lava gun and the bouncer from the vendor. After making your way through the mining shaft, the duo comes up to a new wrench that is locked in glass with a puzzle, but Ratchet solves it in his usual fashion. I love this scene. I can't really explain it, but it just feels like it perfectly encapsulates the duo's dynamic.
Hold on. This one says, use rock to break glass to get wrench to break glass to get rock. Ooh, I love logic puzzles. Let's see. If you break the glass with the...
Solved it.
Your wrench now does more damage, which is a really much needed upgrade, considering it was a struggle to kill the spitting dune crawlers just before with the old wrench. After getting out of the mine, you are confronted by the masked assailant, who demands you return the experiment back to them. But then you let them know that you already returned to Mr. Fizzwidget. They fall off their ship in anger, and then their mask falls off. The masked assailant then tells you that she has no time to explain what's really going on, and instead makes the duo watch another Paul Verhoeven-style ad for Megacorp's testing facility, and tells them to go there to find out more answers to what's really going on. The only issue now is that your ship is still broken, but you run into the New Age Mystic, who says he can fix your ship if you get him 10 desert crystals. Make sure you're loaded up with ammo because going to the desert is dangerous. Spitting dune crawlers and mutant fireflies are hiding beneath the sand, along with the immense desert dune monsters, awaiting your approach in their mounds. After getting the 10 and getting your ship fixed, the Mystic says he'll be awarding you 1,000 bolts for each crystal you return to him. There's 89 remaining out in the desert that you can collect, so another great way to get cash fast for weapons. Now we have one last thing we need to get before leaving Tabora. Going into the other part of the mines, we're doing some light platforming puzzles with the Terminator again. My dumbass kid self somehow got stuck at the end because he didn't realize you had to freeze the water, which then allowed you to do wall jumping to the top. I don't know how the fuck he didn't get this. I must have been really stupid. But at the top you get the glider, which introduces the new flying sections. I hated these as a kid because I was so bad at them. Inverted flight controls were just not my forte. Here's where they start introducing the bullshit nanotech locations. They started simple back in the Canal City, awarding you for just getting to the end of the shopping district, but they'll only be getting more bullshit from here on out. This one isn't too bad, but if you fly too high before getting it, it'll make you fall down and miss it. The real pain in the ass is the next one, the testing facility, which had me pulling my hair out as a kid. And once you reach the end of the flight section, you'll be awarded with a platinum bolt. Now that we have our ship fixed and have the glider, we are ready to head towards the testing facility.
Hey, see if you can find anything worth watching.
Welcome back to Behind the Hero. In yet another setback for the embattled Captain Quark, the Galactic Court ordered him to pay 6 billion bolts in damages to citizens suffering from personal hygienator syndrome. Only 2 days later, Quark was arrested trying to flee to Pokitaru. The one-time hero, now full-time Zero, was placed in custody awaiting trial. But the next day it was discovered that he had escaped, flushing himself to freedom. We will return to Behind the Hero after these messages.
What a nut! I almost miss that guy sometimes. Almost.
Arriving at the testing facility, you can see a new vendor, which will be selling you armor, which you're really going to need if you don't intend to die in 3 hits. While the game introduces on the previous level, on planet Deborah, I thought it would fit more here introducing the new nanotech boxes. These red nanotech boxes heal 4 pips of health compared to the blue ones 1 health. This is a much needed upgrade like the new wrench, because this planet feels like the turning point for when the game's difficulty starts ratcheting up and testing the player. You can now purchase the mini rocket tube from the vendor, which is the base form of the gun Ratchet's holding on the cover of the game. You can enter the facility by using a teleporter by your ship, but we don't want to do that just yet. First, we're going to go right. Going through here, we're going to be fighting a ton of Megacorp troopers, at the end running into the mathematician. If you aren't prepared for this area, the game is rightfully going to kick your ass trying to make your way through it. Like the MSR, the Megacorp chicken bots also have an upgraded V2 model. The mathematician says you're going to be fighting on the planet's moon to see if you are quote-unquote worthy, and this is where the giant Clank sections are brought back from the first game. On the moon, you have to fight the Thugs for Less leader, who is now in an Ultra Mech. This is a pretty decent section. It definitely tests your patience and skills. Destroying the buildings will resupply your rocket ammo along with health. The Thugs for Less helicopters are also buzzing around you the whole fight. You could choose to ignore them, but you probably should destroy them first unless you plan on beating down every building to just completely replenish your health, because they're going to be depleting it faster. After winning, you get invited to the Megacorp Games, which is the sequel arena to the first one back on Maktar. Now entering the testing facility, you'll have to do a light stealth section, sneaking past the Megacorp Sentinels. This part can be really tough if you fail to sneak past them, because not only are the Sentinels attacking you, but the Megacorp troopers and the Blade Bots version 2. The last platforming section with the dynamo can be rather challenging, because if you activate the next part of the platform to appear, the one you're currently standing on will disappear, and if you're not already jumping to it, then you're just going to fall back into the pit and have to start over from the beginning. But this pales in comparison to how difficult this next gliding section is. The developers even bring it up on their commentary, saying how this is too difficult to the point where you can't even take in how nice the area looks, because you're too focused on trying to dodge everything so you don't have to fucking start over. While I don't think it's that bad, it's definitely really annoying, especially that last part with the tube that you have to try to angle with and be careful for all the rotating spikes. Definitely the worst part about this gliding section was the nanotech boost. Man, fuck that thing. It is so annoying to try to get. There's 2 possible ways you can try. So one method is you go all the way to the very end and then loop around before you land, or as you pass the first room with the nanotech boost, you fly to the ceiling, causing yourself to swoop back down and reverse. I spent countless hours getting this thing. It is so fucking infuriating. I could never do this as a kid. That was like one of the few things I was never able to accomplish, because I usually tried to 100% all the games I had as a kid. I think the only other one that comes to mind that I never able to accomplish was the Neopets game, which was just a knockoff Legend of Zelda. Once you manage to get to the end and you're able to restore the power, going back to the teleprompter encounter, you then have to pay 10,000 bolts in order to see the cutscene, which has Ratchet making a funny remark about how everyone is charging him in this galaxy. Paying up allows you to see how deadly the experiment truly is. Then you try to warn Mr. Fizzwidge and he tells you to meet him at his rendezvous point. The Deep Space Disposal is the third space combat section in the game, and I think it's probably the worst one. It's rather small and the turrets are really annoying to fight. If you are like me and barely upgraded your ship so you can actually play the enjoyable parts of the game, you're going to be having a little bit of a difficult time. Your best bet is to get all the turrets extremely low and then finish them all off in one loop, because once you destroy a turret, repair bots will come to try and fix it. So if you're just going one by one at full health each, then the repair bots are going to be able to restore it faster than you're able to destroy others if you don't have your weapons fully maxed out. The duo is furious with Mr. Fizzwidge, rightfully so, because they could have died here. He apologizes that he gave them the wrong password. He then completely blows them off and talks about a commercial he was just in, showing off the Megacorp armories. So now you have the option to go to two places. You can either go to the Megacorp games or we could head to the Megacorp armory. We're going to want to go to the games first. Arriving on planet Joba will allow you to purchase the Plasma Coil and the Spider-Bot Glove. Going forward will take you to the Megacorp games, but we don't want to do that just yet. Instead, we're going to go right and participate in the second hoverbike race first. This race introduces the randomized weapon crates that you can get, somewhat similar to Mario Kart. You have the pistols, you have the rockets, a electrical wire that shoots out that destroys any ship that's in front of you. This adds a really cool extra layer. I do think this map is somewhat weaker than the first one. I definitely enjoyed the first hoverbike race more than I did this one, but winning first place awards you with the charge boots. Like their name implies, tapping R1 twice will allow you to zoom forward. Somewhat similar to the rocket thrust Clank when you have him in jetpack mode, but this time it won't stop until you hit something. Now that we have the charge boots, we can make our way through the tribesmen's camps to reach the Megacorp games. The gun variant tribesmen are no joke. Even with the armor upgrade, they're still doing 5 pips of damage a shot. Midway through, you'll have a really good platforming challenge with the Dynamo. This is a really good example of starting off easy with the first floor being very simple with just 3 platforms you have to jump over, then getting a little harder with the second floor, and then having the third floor be the most difficult because if you don't time your jumps right, you're going to miss because you can't grab the ledges. After that, you can take the grind rail down where you'll run into the Rhino salesman from the first game, but this time he's selling a levitator, which you will need to use to reach the Megacorp arena at the cost of 20,000 bolts. I really like now, since Ratchet has won at the first arena back on Mactar, the announcer refers to him by name instead of just some guy. But now he refers to Clank as some metal guy since he wasn't with him the last time on Mactar. Winning your first match will award you the gravity boots, which will allow you to walk up the ramps like the one we saw on planet Uzla at the very beginning of the game, along with you being able to take part in the second game, the cage match. Winning the cage match will award you the Infiltrator. Like the Electrolyzer, the Infiltrator is another puzzle-based gadget used to open doors. The door we mentioned back on Ondako can be opened with this, and behind it is another nanotech boost. Also on Ondako, the soda cans and the trash bins have the name Dan on them, another reference to Dan Johnson. Now that we've acquired the Infiltrator, we can either choose to stay and fight the other 2 bosses of the Megacorp arena, or we can head to the Megacorp armory. Hey, awkward cut in the video. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you because we're about 34 minutes in. So at this point, for when I was making this video, my PS3 actually died. So it's taken me a lot longer to get this done. After I got it fixed, which took, like 3 days or so, it only worked for another day. Then it died again. This is what happens when your motherboard fails and you have to do a reflow. At first, I thought it was just a fan issue. Maybe the video card was being fried. So I put it in front of a fan and put a bunch of ice cubes on it. That didn't fucking work. So then I had to go take it back to the store and they gave me a refund and I bought another one. So I had to play through the whole game again. It's a good thing that I love this game or else this video probably would have been fucking scrapped. Anyway, thanks for sitting through my mini rant and getting back to the video. Hope you're enjoying it so far. The Megacorp Armory is in contention for one of my favorite planets in the game. I always think the best levels in Ratchet & Clank are always the ones with the most vibrant amount of color. So planets like Novalis and Pokitaru from the first game are excellent examples. They perfectly encapsulate all the charm this series has to offer. I also love the planets where you had interactable NPCs that were non-hostile. As a kid, I spent countless hours just running through the starting area, making up stories in my head, protecting the tourists from the experimental squirrels, which will attack them while they're on their tour. You now have the ability to purchase the hover bomb gun from the vendor. If you hit the last rocket enough with your wrench, it'll shoot into the sky, later falling onto the Megacorp guard bod. Just like on Planet Joba, going forward progresses the plot, so we'll be going right into the weapons armory. The Inspector bot from Mactar will be making a return along with new tractor beam puzzles, making you have to block the shields with the tractor beam pillars. If you are an observant player, you'll notice that there is an opening at the top of this room, which you can reach by making the pillars into steps. At the top, you'll run into a Quark fanboy who will trade you his gadget for a Quark collectible. He reminds me a lot of Sheen from Jimmy Neutron. Even sounds like it too.
At last we meet. Nobly, I fall on the field of battle. Finish me, Lombax!
No force in the universe can stop his awesome powers. Go!
Sadly, we do not have it right now, so we'll have to leave a mental note and come back later. Halfway through, there'll be another infiltrator puzzle which lowers an elevator, which will allow you to reach another nanotech boost. At the end of the armory, you'll be awarded with the Sheepinator, one of the game's few gag guns. Hitting enemies with the beam long enough will turn them into sheep. Well, that explains why there were so many sheep down here. I guess that means all the workers got Oh no. Now all that's left is to go through the minefield. I really like the sound the mines make when they explode. It really reminds me of Mega Man X's charge shot. After the minefield is another part of the armory, but this is pretty much just a straight shot. You just have to fight a lot of Megacorp troopers. At the end, you'll be able to talk to the mass assailant. You'll learn her name is Angela, along with the fact that Megacorp is going to mass produce the experiment going under the name the Protopet, putting the whole galaxy in danger. Angela tells you if you still want to try to reason with Fizzwidget, your best bet is to meet him at Silver City.
Listen up, thugs for less. We got a big job ahead, so pay attention. Megacorp has hired us to protect their CEO, Mr. Fizzwidget. They feel that he's getting a little, cuckoo in his old age and are concerned for his safety. Now, Fizzwidget's kind of old-fashioned, so I want everything handled with the pride and courtesy people have come to expect from us. Also, be on the lookout for these two characters. I have a personal interest in seeing them rubbed out, so I'm offering a free pizza party to the squad who bags them. And remember, that includes drinks and desserts. Over and out.
The Silver City is a really cool level because it does a lot of interesting things with the platforming. To start off, you need to turn off the electricity that's blocking the main gate. You get on a flying taxi that'll take you to the underground traffic area, where you'll be using the levitator to fly through moving traffic, along with trying to dodge electrical wires everywhere. This has to be hands down the biggest "how the fuck did I have any trouble with this as a kid" section. It literally makes no sense to me trying to think of it now. It's a simple flight that you just need to dodge 1 or 2 ships at a time, so you don't get pushed back with a little fuel you have remaining. Making it to the end of the subway, you'll be brought back to the surface right behind the electrical door. Pushing the button will deactivate this, allowing you to get back to your ship if you want to, say, return to another planet. Progressing the story on this planet will actually force us to leave it no matter what, so if you want to do any of the optional stuff without having to come back later, we're going to have to do it now. To the right of the button is another amazing grind rail section, where you'll be riding on electrical wires through the town and construction sites. Looking to your left and right while riding the grind rail, you'll be able to see areas you'll be going to later in the level, so you get an idea of what you're going to be up against. At the end, you'll be running into Slim Cognito again, but this time you'll be able to upgrade late game weapons like the mini rocket tube. You're really going to want to take this opportunity to upgrade as many weapons as you can with all the bolts you've been saving up to at this point. Now comes the hard part. Going forward, you'll be fighting tooth and nail against the Thugs for Less goons through the streets of the Silver City. You fight so many of them that I leveled up 5 times throughout this area. This is a really tough area, even with a lot of the good upgraded weapons, since there's just so many of them and they really pack a punch. There's also a nanotech boost that you can get that's sitting on top of a fountain. I'm guessing they put that here to throw you a bone for having to try to get the last one on planet Joba. If you had purchased the Spider-Bot glove at this point, you can use it to send it through this tiny little shaft, which will allow you to unlock another door on the other side of the streets, which will allow you to get to another platinum bolt. Now that you have the gravity boots, the game starts getting really interesting with its platforming, having you go through loop-de-loops fighting goons while scaling the side of buildings while they shoot at you from the windows. This section is excellent. At the top of the tower, there's another armor upgrade you can purchase here. Sadly, the final bolt of this level you're going to have to come back to, since the cutscene triggers where you try to talk to Mr. Fizzwidget, which is instead actually a robo copy of him, like back at the Megacorp armories. When interrogating the robo Fizzwidget, the Thugs for Less leader ambushes you and puts you under arrest for
attempting to bump off Mr. Fizzwidget,
and takes you to the Thugs for Less prison back on Eranos. It seems as though our heroes are trapped with no way out, but then the female bot that's been in the background for most of the game, trying to get close to Clank, breaks through a vent which allows Clank to try to get out to deactivate the force skills to free Ratchet. I didn't mention this earlier during the first Clank level, but in between recording that half and this half of the video, I started playing through Ratchet & Clank 1 again. While I can agree that these levels are on the boring side, especially this one compared to the first one, they're at least better than the issues that the Clank levels had in the first game. Like the fact that you had to go back to where the bots spawned to get them to come with you again. Also the fact the commands overall just weren't as crisp and clean, like the AI was really bad and unresponsive at times. That doesn't really give these levels a pardon, but it definitely makes me view them in a nicer light. At least they don't overstay their welcome, like some of the Clank sections in the Future trilogy do. Once you lower the shield as Clank, you can take control of Ratchet again. You don't have a way to meet up with him right now, so you're going to be returning to fighting solo, like at the beginning of the game. You can now purchase the Zodiac and the shield charge from the vendor. The Zodiac is another game-breaking weapon. Charging it up and firing it will allow you to vaporize any enemy that is currently on your screen. You're really going to want to watch out for the MSR version 3s, because they will kick your ass, dealing 5 pips of damage even in the second suit. At the end of this Ratchet section, you'll be jumping on disappearing platforms again. I really wish they did more with these in this game, because it could have really opened up to some neat ideas to make sure your timing is immaculate, also your positioning is great or you're going to fall because the platforms will disappear, but I'm not going to complain with what we got. Now we'll be switching back to Clank again to do another short little level. This time you're just trying to make your way to meet back up with Ratchet rather than trying to let him out. Again, it's more of the same. You use the hammer bot to break the thing, you use the bridge bot to make a path, you use the little guys to attack the enemies so you can't punch yourself. After you reach your checkpoint, you switch back to Ratchet, who runs into a new wrench, and he looks directly into the camera and talks to the player.
Hey, check this out. Another wrench.
You get to use the gravity boots again by fighting outside on the side of the ship, fighting the flamethrower MSR. After you join back up with Clank, you'll now have to do some levitator sections through lava. And you guessed it, I sucked at it as a kid. With all those damn timed electrical currents and the rising lava, this is just too much for my child mind to comprehend apparently. Going through the first door, you'll be finding the plumber from the first game, and a pipe that's clogged with a Quark action figure. You can buy it off him for 20,000 bolts. Then he says he'll see you in a year, which is in reference to Up Your Arsenal, which was in development at the time. Going through the second door, you'll get a distress signal from Angela, who has now been captured by the thugs, and you now need to go save her. Let's just get the Quark action figure out of the way and go back to the Megacorp armory, where we're then able to give it to the crazed fan.
Cool.
Look at that craftsmanship!
The Thug Fleet is the final ship combat level in the game, and boy does it suck like all the rest. By now you really do need to go get some upgrades from Slim's Ship Shack, or you're going to really struggle with this level if you aren't an ace pilot. And even then, the damage from the basic enemy ships that you kill in 2 hits is ridiculous. That having no upgrades at all I don't think is really doable, unless you're really lucky with the ammo drops and the shield drops from destroying them. Once you destroy the final carrier ship, you realize that Angela wasn't in any of them. You then get a message from the Thugs for Less leader telling you guys to return to your galaxy or else, but he didn't realize he was broadcasting his exact location, so now you can head to the Thugs for Less headquarters. I think the Thugs HQ is probably the hardest level in the whole game. I was going through some old forums and threads about it while working on this video, and it seemed like the general consensus from most people in these threads was the Thugs HQ was the hardest level. Man, fuck that nanotech boost at the beginning. While it's not as bad as the Megacorp testing facility, it did take me at least 30 minutes even in this playthrough to try to get. You just gotta get lucky and hope the magic pixel you hit the right geometry that you just get propped up onto the roof. It's honestly not that worth just for one health pip unless you're trying to platinum the game. This level is just getting through the streets of the Thugs HQ and making it towards the boss. The streets are filled with so many thugs, tanks, and helicopters. Even with some of the better weapons like the mini turret gun, the synth drones, and the mini tube rocket, will be a complete struggle, and you'll probably lose the first few attempts. Honestly, your best bet is to rush past them with the charge boots to save you some health for the boss. If you want to grind weapon experience and nanotech experience, then this is an excellent place as well. My next complaint is still on the nitpicky side, but it does feel like poor pacing for armor upgrades, considering you have the option to buy the Carbonox armor in 2 planets, and you just had the ability to buy armor on the previous planet. Maybe they could have just spaced out the armor upgrades a little more, maybe have the Carbonox and New Game Plus armor, or have the first armor upgrade be earlier and cheaper, but realistically it doesn't hurt the flow of the game too much. Once you reach the Thugs for Less leader, he has Angela imprisoned in the chest of his Giganto mech, and it is your job to break her out. This boss fight spans through the small city section of Snivlac, shooting at it with turrets positioned around the city until it takes enough damage to come over and squash them like a bug. It's overall an okay boss fight, but if someone was to argue that it dragged on longer than it needed to because of all the projectile bombs that hover towards the turrets you're at and you have to shoot them down before they reach you, which takes away time from you being able to shoot the Thug's mech, I wouldn't disagree with them if they said that was annoying and that was a detractor from the fight. After defeating the mech and freeing Angela, the gang decides it's for the best that they split up. Angela will head back to her homeworld to get her old Megacorp keycard, while the duo will head to the shipyards to stop as much of the protopet distribution as possible. When I see discussion about this game, I never see anyone mention this planet, so I'm going to go by the idea that it's underrated. I really like this planet. It uses all the platform gadgets and actually takes advantage of it being a floating shipyard. If you haven't upgraded your armor yet, this level will kick your ass. Even the small little Grulch that kind of look like Bagon from Pokemon will be doing decent damage to you. Going left will have you fly across the shipyard using the levitator and the hook shot. At the end, you'll meet Mutant Crab, a sophisticated 2-headed Smolgian snapper who failed to grow his second head due to the harsh air. He says if you give him some bolts, he'll have something for you. And everyone in this galaxy is just ripping into your wallet. I feel like a parent with 4 teenagers. After you give him 60,000 bolts, he shows you a video of protopets wreaking havoc on a city. Returning to the start, you can take a jump pad like on the previous planet and go into the warehouse where all the protopets are supposed to be stored. Making your way through, you'll get a message at the halfway point from Angela saying that she needs your help with the protopets on her planet. You can choose to leave now, but if you do, you'll eventually have to come back for the piece of the Hypnomatic that's at the end. Planet Grelbin is probably the most widely hated level in the game. Most people hate it because of the enemy, the Yeti, are so plentiful to the point where it seems unfair, along with the fact they have extremely fast startup frames so it doesn't give the player enough time to react and dodge their attacks. What a lot of people don't know is that this level was made in 3 days by one of the lead designers. You can hear him talk about making this level in the developer commentary.
Just so you guys know out there, Tony's being humble. They gave it to Tony because they knew somebody had to code these things in 3 days.
Yeah,
and they needed somebody who could code something reasonable in 3 days.
So that was the deal. It was 3 days until this level was due. Man, these guys really are everywhere. So yeah, we had 3 days to get this level done. And they basically said, well, the level's sort of been already worked on. Just finish it. But me being me, I was like, well, I'm not going to work with somebody else's stuff. I'm going to delete it all and start from scratch.
Because it would save you time.
It would be easier for me to just start from scratch. As ridiculous as that may sound, it was easier for me to just start from scratch and, begin from nothing. And it was basically 3 days to put this level together.
With all the work he had to juggle plus this level, it's amazing that we even got something as good as this and functional in 3 days. But I hated this level for a whole nother reason: the glider section. This part was the hardest part in the whole entire game for me as a child. I remember trying it so much and failing right at the end because of that tight little part you had to fly through. I almost snapped my PS2 controller when I failed. I almost never finished this game because of this section. This level is fundamentally just Deborah flora, but instead of a desert, it's an ice planet. Once you get enough moonstones to move the rock with the help of the Mystic, he tells you bring him 16 more, he'll give you a part of the Hypnomatic. Once you do that, you'll have to leave the planet since you need the Hypnomatic to continue on to the other part of the level. This is something that I feel that this game is actually lacking compared to the first game, is that it has interlocking levels, which requires you to leave planets preemptively to either get another gadget or complete a task so you can loop back around to your original planet to complete all the tasks on that one. Like how you had to leave Pokitaru to go to Gaspar to get the pilot's helmet so you could go back to Pokitaru and control the jet, so you could destroy all the Blarg gunships so then you could get the H2O mask, which would allow you to go back to the Blarg homeworld, which you previously couldn't explore as Ratchet because of all the toxic air. That's 3 planets you had to go through in order to just complete one. It definitely took more advantage of the fact that it was a space adventure game spawning across multiple planets. This is the only real example where you can't complete a whole level by itself and you have to actually come back from going to another planet to get other things in order to complete it.
And now, Behind the Hero brings you the conclusion of our series on Captain Quark. As of this airing, the fugitive superhero has been missing for almost 6 weeks. Did he die heroically? Was he the victim of an overzealous fan? Or is he still out there somewhere? The galaxy may never know, but stay tuned for more baseless speculation and crackpot theories on Behind the Hero.
Well, no more Quark. Good. It is almost time for RoboChef.
Algon City is my favorite level in the entire game. I love how the streets are filled in utter chaos with the proto-pets wreaking havoc while the civilians are in a panic. It just makes for a lot of good fun to mess around in, and it makes the worlds feel more lived in. At the start, you have 3 options of what you can do. Going left will take you to another Giant Clank level. Right is the best grind rail section in the game. Forward takes you through the streets of Algon. We're gonna go left first and fight the mothership as Giant Clank. Beating it will award you the Mapper. This item will show hidden locations on your map along with crystal locations for both the desert and the frozen tundra. This will really help you get those last few remaining bolts that are hidden throughout the game so you could have all the upgrades you need for the final level. Now we will go right onto the grind rail section, and oh my god, is it amazing. Whoever came up with the teleporting train idea deserves a pat on the back, a raise, and a medal. This section is fantastic. At the end, we will now have the final piece of the Hypnomatic, along with a reference to Jak and Daxter, where Clank does Daxter's dance from the first game. Now we just need to find someone who can assemble the Hypnomatic. Returning to the start, we will now go through the streets of Algon, which are in utter chaos. Civilian bots are being chased by the army of Protopets, which are also trying to be combated by the Extermabots, which are programmed to kill anything small and fuzzy. That includes you. The fact that the Protopets reproduce by merely throwing up more of them really adds to the panic. One second there could be a few of them behind you and you decide to fight the Extermabots, and then you turn around and a small militia of them are now attacking you. Remember how I mentioned earlier in the video that I usually wait till a certain point to use and buy the pulsed rifle? Well, now we're at that point. To enter the store, you need to kill all the Protopets and the bots in this area, but 2 of them are on top of the store, and if you don't have the mini rocket tube, it's really hard to hit them. Although I didn't have it on this save because I had to replay through the whole game because my PS3 died like I mentioned earlier, you're just gonna have to use your imagination that this is the best section to use the gun. In the store, you can see Dan Johnson's face on the cereal boxes, and at the end, you run into the Hypnotist, who can put all 3 of the parts you obtained together to complete the Hypnomatic. With the Hypnomatic, you can take control of the small receiver bots, like the ones you fought earlier on the planet Grelbin. Once you hit the switch near the statue, a cab will now enter the room, allowing you to leave, and now having everything completed on this planet, you can now head back to Grelbin and get to Angela's house. As much as I like playing as the receiver bots, trying to swap to one another is utter bullshit. Half the time it doesn't even register that they're there in front of you, and the other half, the fuckers just walk away, where you're out of range to try to transfer to them. Hitting the buttons will lower the platforms that will allow Ratchet to get across the chasm. In front of Angela's house are a ton of Protopets. Defeating all of them will allow you to reunite with her, where she shows you a video that will take us to the final plan of the game. But first we have a few more stops to make. Now we're going to do some last minute backtracking for stuff that I couldn't naturally fit into the flow of the video. First up is the optional boss back on Uzla. Remember how I said the ramp at the end will return to? It'll take you up to a pipe you could jump down and you'll arrive into the lair of the optional boss, the Swamp Monster 2. We could have fought it as soon as we got the gravity boots from the Megacorp difficult games, but the boss is quite the bullet sponge, so it would have been rather difficult. It still is, even going to it now with all the weapons I have upgraded. You better make sure your ammo is fully maxed out, because there's no way to retrieve any once this boss starts, because if you run out of ammo, you're fucked and you only have the wrench to rely on. Once beating it, you'll be awarded with the box breaker. When doing an overhead strike, you will now be able to break all the destructible objects near you. Plus, you add the magnet you got from the Quark fan, you'll be raking in more bolts now than ever. The last thing we should do is upgrade our guns with all the bolts we have gotten throughout the game. Along with the bolt we are forced to skip due to the plot progression back on Silver City. If you really wanted to, you could get all the desert crystals and the moonstones to max out bolts and weapons, but I'm not going to do that for this video, and it takes quite a while. But you're free to do that if you want to. We finally made it. It's been a long ride and it hasn't been easy, but we are now at the final stretch. Our journey has led us to the center of this galaxy, Planet Yeatle, the Proto-Pet Factory. When you first get out of your ship, you can see how massive and imposing the factory is looming over you. I think this is an example of a perfect final level. It combines everything that you have learned so far and puts it into effect one way or another. Sometimes in adventure games where you get a lot of tools, they just get lost in the shuffle as the game progresses, but on Yeatle you make use of everything you have. We start off with the Hypnomatic again, going through a maze of force fields and enemies, trying to get to the buttons to lower the swing shot markers so Ratchet can swing across the chasms. Megacorp is trying to stop you at all costs, so they're going to throw everything they got at you. You'll be opening multiple doors with the Infiltrator to get further into the factory. If you're having a hard time with dealing with the troopers and tanks, if you can get through the animation of starting up the Infiltrator, you could actually skip fighting these guys. But this is hard unless you have the shield charger. Now you'll be using the dynamo to jump across propellers while dodging fire from flying troopers. The weakest gadget inclusion here is definitely the Terminator, because it's only used in this one room, and it's just used to insta-kill all the Proto-Pets. I don't really know what else you're supposed to do with it, but maybe there was another use for it in this room that I'm just not seeing. Finally, you reach the end, and the female bot that's been helping you guys out throughout the game stops and warns you, showing you a clip of Captain Quark saying he's going to save the galaxy from a new menace. Fizzwidget then appears behind her, shooting and killing her. Then Fizzwidget whips out his own wrench. I mean, he undresses and reveals to be Captain Quark. Throughout the video, I've been sprinkling in clips of Captain Quark's story that's been happening in the background of this game, about how he was arrested and became washed up, owing the galaxy 6 billion bolts, then escaping by flushing himself down the toilet. Quark then reveals that he has orchestrated this whole disaster, so he could swoop in and save this galaxy from his own crafted nightmare, to become a beloved hero once again. The only thing is, the gadget that's supposed to fix the Proto-Pets actually mutates into one giant monster and eats Quark. This fight is really tough, even with a good selection of weapons. I know I've mentioned it in previous videos and on streams that I hate bosses that throw a ton of mobs at you, because this shows that the boss isn't interesting enough to fight on its own. While that's true here, at least it has the courtesy to stand at the end of the stage while you're fighting the little enemies it throws at you. This is where you'll be using the tractor beam to snatch up the bombs like the ones we used to destroy the force field back on Maktar. You have to prevent the Proto-Pet monster from eating it, or it'll be now shooting meteors at you. After you defeat it, Angela shows up with the real Fizzwidget. The day is saved and Ratchet promises to save the female bot. Once the credits end, we see the gang back at Clank's apartment on Endako, and then we are shown what ends up becoming of Quark. Sadly, this is the last time we see Angela, other than at the premiere of the Secret Agent Clank showing in the next game, because I assume she's been retconned with the whole future series plotline of Ratchet being the last of his kind and Clank's origins with the Timekeeper and shit, or they just left her on the cutting room floor, which is sad because they could have done some cool stuff with her in later installments, more than I could say what they did with Quark in the future. Alright, now that we've reached the end of the video, let's do some last minute gushing that I couldn't fit in naturally. I love the sound of the double jump. That whoosh whip sound effect has never been topped for me. The soundtrack is amazing. While I think Ratchet Clank 1 has the overall better OST, this one still has some bangers. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you for watching. It only took me 2 PS3s to get this video done, and I was really unsure about making it. I was super self-conscious thinking that I couldn't do this game justice, so hopefully you weren't too disappointed by me and thought this video was actually good. If this is the first video you've seen of my channel, then don't expect this to be a regular series. I'm just really passionate about this game, and I probably won't do another video like this unless I'm equally as passionate about that subject. The only one I can really think of is Nier, but Clem's has already made an excellent series on that, so go watch those videos instead. Maybe down the line I'll do a video talking about Ratchet Clank Up Your Arsenal, but a lot of my issues with that game have already pretty much been said by Gaming Brit in his video. It'd probably just end up being a short little video listing my gripes and what that I wish I could have been improved in it. I also want to thank all of my supporters on Patreon because I don't really have anything I could offer to them other than just sneak peeks in my videos. I don't have any reward tiers, so I really appreciate it that people are willing to support the channel. I don't really mention it that much because, again, I feel really bad that I don't have anything to offer for it. I also want to shout out my sponsor, Imperium Duelist, which has some new Yu-Gi-Oh! Related shirts available, which I know a good chunk of my fan base is into. They currently have the Shadal Construct, Evil Swarm Excaton Knight, Nekroz of Gugnir, and Shirt the Strategist of Nekroz. You can purchase these shirts at ImperiumDuelist.com. The links for this, my Patreon, and my Twitch, which I have been streaming on recently, playing the Neopets game that I mentioned earlier in the video, along with Duel Links, trying to reach King of Games, all will be in the description below. So again, thanks you all for watching, and see you next time.